I don't believe Trump has any understanding of the real nature of Russia.
Ukraine cast from BBC News.
Let's get some immediate reaction from you to some of the lines coming out of this meeting in Saudi Arabia. This is what the US Secretary of State has said. Today's meeting is the first step of a long and difficult journey. Everyone involved in the Ukraine conflict has to be okay with the solution to end it. And our goal, meaning the US's goal, is a fair, enduring, sustainable end to the Ukraine war. How do you respond to those?
I think it's Clyde Cuckoo Land.
Do you?
I think that it shows a failure to understand what Russia is about. And what Russia is about is removing Ukraine from the map as a sovereign state, about incorporating Ukraine, either physically annexing it in terms of the eastern and southern regions of Ukraine, and installing a puppet government in Kiev, so Ukraine becomes a sort of client state rather like Belarus. Because that's deep in the Russian DNA. And I think any American negotiator who doesn't understand that and thinks there can be a durable, lasting solution with a sovereign Ukraine and that Russia will accept that is deluding themselves.
What does this all mean for Europe, NATO, and the rest of the Western alliance?
Well, what it means after last week's pronouncements in Munich, firstly, Trump's announcement that he'd had the 90-minute call with Putin, that he was setting up peace talks over the heads of the Ukrainian government. And then we heard Hegseth and Vance's pretty strident words. What this means is the Pax Americana is finished, that America has effectively abdicated its leadership of the free world because with leadership comes the responsibilities. It has made it very clear that it is not going to be the security guarantor for Europe. And the so what out of all that is that Europe has to, and Canada, and we shouldn't forget the Canadians are part of this equation too, Europe and Canada, if they want the sort of collective security, need to forge a new form of alliance, perhaps on the back of NATO. But effectively, NATO is now in danger of being held below the waterline by what the Americans have said. So the absolute overriding principle now is European unity. That's a big ask. We saw yesterday in Paris. Yes, the European leaders who were present are saying, yes, of course, we need to spend more on defence. And many European countries are. I particularly highlight Poland, for example, plus of 4%, the Baltic states. But where are the Western Europeans of Britain and France and Germany? And then any talk of a united front as far as, and it's a long way off, but if there were to be some form of peace implementation force, I mean, the Germans have made it pretty clear that, as Mr. Scholz said, he's irritated by that conversation. So I think there's a real risk of Europe falling at the first fence. But the only solution to the challenge that Europe faces long term, and that we have to understand that Russia is not going to go away here, that Russia is wedded to, has maintained forward momentum by incorporating Ukraine, and then it'll move on. And so that brings it potentially into confrontation with the rest of Europe.
Physically.
If it sees NATO in disarray, if it sees that, and it's already seeing the American guarantee effectively null and void, if it believes that it'll get a chance, it could so easily decide to have a go at all of or some of the Baltic states, which brings it directly into confrontation with the rest of NATO.
Can I push back a little bit? Why would President Trump want to allow Moscow, President Putin, to continue with its campaign against Ukraine, to bring it into Russia's orbit? Because everybody who watches President Trump says he's a winner, he likes to win. He's not going to want President Putin to be able to go back to his people and say, yeah, we've won?
Let's just scotch this idea of Trump being a winner.
Okay.
Trump did the deal with the Taliban in 2020 over the head of the Afghan government, which resulted in the complete collapse of the NATO mission in August 2022.
So maybe he's learned from that.
I think it's highly unlikely. And the second point I'd make is that I don't believe Trump has any understanding of the real nature of Russia. And he's kidding himself if he believes that he, the master of the deal, can sort this one out. The only way there will be peace long term in Ukraine, in Europe, and against a revanchist Russia determined to rebuild another Russian empire, is through a strong NATO deterrent presence from the Baltic to the Black Sea, incorporating Ukraine as a NATO member, which requires every NATO member, America included, to lean in and, as a start, put together a strategy to support the Ukrainians in defeating Russia, because that's the only way Russia is going to be stopped. Anything less than that, which is what we're seeing now in spade loads, is merely starting the unraveling of European security, which could so easily end in catastrophe.
Okay, so you said a few moments ago, perhaps there has to be a new NATO, minus the US, a new kind of alliance. Why would Russia take that seriously?
It will only take it seriously if it is strong, if it is capable.
It can't be strong without the US, though, can it?
It cannot be as strong without the US. And this is where Europe, and I appreciate all this sounds like cloud cuckoo land, but Europe have got to say, right, we've got to start somewhere now. We, through our failure to spend more on defense, our willingness to freeload off American largesse for the last umpteen decades, have now got to dig deep, because we've now got to replace the capabilities that America brought to the alliance. Now, that is one massive ask. Of course it is. And the only way that the alliance will continue to be respected is through a demonstration by Europe that it's prepared to do so.
And do you think European leaders really get that now?
I don't think they do.
Really?
I don't think they do.
Well,
Well, I mean, only where let's look at this country. At the moment, we've seen no clear commitment to spending more than, at the moment, 2.3% of GDP on defence. Oh, yes, there's an intention to move to 2.5, quote, when conditions allow. Where has been the action this day? We are now going to put together a clear strategy to achieve 3% of GDP on defence as soon as is possible, with a clear understanding of what sacrifices need to be made, what tax rises have to be put in place, what ministries have got to be cut, because that is what is needed, and that requires huge leadership. And frankly, unless there's some clear commitment, nothing else, there's going to be no credibility.
Ukraine cast from BBC News.